The ship came out of hyperspace with a soft hum. Ambassador Park stood at the observation window and watched as the planet Prime grew larger. It was a beautiful world. Purple clouds moved slowly across its surface. 3 moons hung in the sky like pearls on a string. This was the center of galactic civilization. This was where humanity would finally take its place among the stars. Or so she hoped. Behind her, Admiral Doha checked his uniform for the 10th time. He was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Beside him stood Doctor, a small woman with gentle features and the sharpest mind on Earth. These 3 carried the hopes of 8 billion people on their shoulders. "Remember," said without turning from the window, "we are here to make friends, not enemies. Whatever happens in that chamber, we stay calm. We stay polite. We show them that humans can be trusted." Doha made a sound that was almost a laugh. "And if they say no?" Finally turned to face him. Her eyes were hard. "Then we find another way." The council chamber was the most impressive thing any of them had ever seen. It was carved from a single piece of crystal that rose so high the ceiling disappeared into clouds of soft light. 12 platforms floated in a circle, each one holding a representative of the galaxy's most powerful species. Some looked almost human. Others were so strange that had to remind herself not to stare. There were beings made of pure light. There were tall reptiles with scales that changed color with their moods. There were massive creatures with 4 arms and faces that showed no emotion. Each species had ruled their corner of the galaxy for thousands of years. Together, they had maintained peace for 50,000 years. And now, humanity was asking to join them. Walked to the center of the chamber. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. She could feel the weight of 12 alien gazes pressing down on her. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Humanity comes before you today not as conquerors but as students. We have only just learned to travel between stars. We know that we are young. We know that we have much to learn, but we also know that we have much to offer." She spoke for an hour. She told them about human art and music. She told them about human science and medicine. She told them about the wars humanity had fought and the peace they had finally achieved. She told them about human dreams and human hopes. She spoke with all the passion and sincerity she possessed. When she finished, there was silence. The high speaker floated forward. It had no face, no body that could understand. It was simply light, beautiful and terrible at the same time. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We have listened to your words, human. We have studied your species for many years. We have watched you from afar." Felt hope rise in her chest. "And what have you concluded?" "That you are dangerous." The word hit her like a physical blow. She kept her face still, but behind her she heard Doha shift his weight. She knew he was angry. She knew was afraid. She could not afford to be either. "Dangerous," she repeated calmly. "In what way?" The high speaker's light flickered. "Your species has existed for only a brief moment in galactic time. Yet in that moment, you have fought thousands of wars. You have built weapons capable of destroying your own world. You have polluted your planet almost beyond repair. You spread across your solar system not through cooperation, but through competition. We have also created great beauty," said. "We have shown great kindness. We have learned from our mistakes." "Perhaps," the high speaker said, "but the council cannot take that risk. Your application for membership is—" Felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She had prepared for this possibility, but hearing the words still hurt more than she expected. Still, she kept her voice level. "If we cannot join the council, perhaps we can exist alongside it. We ask only for territory where we can build our colonies, where we can grow and prove ourselves." The council members turned to each other, colors shifted, lights flickered, sounds that might have been whispers filled the air, waited, minutes passed. Finally, the high speaker turned back to her. "The council has decided. You may have the outer rim. Did not know what the outer rim was, but something in the way the high speaker said those words made her stomach tight. The outer rim, she asked. The dead zones at the edge of the galaxy, barren worlds, unstable stars, radiation fields that destroy unprotected ships. We have deemed these regions worthless for 10,000 generations. That is all we will offer your kind. Behind, Doha took a step forward. His face was red with anger. You're giving us nothing, he said, his voice loud in the crystal chamber. You're sending us to die. The representative spoke for the first time. Its scales had turned a deep red. We are giving you a chance you do not deserve. Take it or leave it. Raised her hand to stop Doha from speaking again. She looked at the 12 platforms. She looked at the beings who had just condemned humanity to the worst corner of the galaxy. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to tell them exactly what she thought of their arrogance and their fear. Instead, she bowed. Humanity accepts your generous offer, she said. The words tasted like poison in her mouth, but she spoke them clearly. We will take the outer rim, and we will remember this day. The high speaker's light seemed to dim slightly. Remember it how you wish. You may leave. The three humans walked out of the chamber in silence. They did not speak until they were back on their ship, until the doors were sealed and no alien ears could hear them. Then Doha slammed his fist against the wall. They've killed us, he said. They've killed us without firing a single shot. The outer rim, I've read the surveys, nothing survives out there. Nothing. Was crying quietly. All those years of preparation, all those dreams for nothing. Stood at the window again. She watched Prime grow smaller as their ship pulled away. Her face was calm, but her hands were shaking. No, she said softly, not for nothing. Doha turned to look at her. What do you mean? Finally smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been pushed into a corner and was already planning how to fight back. They think they've buried us, she said. They think they've thrown us away like garbage, but they've made a mistake, the biggest mistake in the history of their precious council. What mistake? Asked, wiping her eyes. Turned to face them both. Her eyes were burning with a fire that neither of them had ever seen before. They've forgotten what humans do best, she said. We survive, we adapt, we overcome. They've given us the dead zones, fine, we'll make them bloom. They've given us the wasteland, perfect. We'll turn it into an empire. And one day when they need us, when their comfortable little galaxy starts falling apart, they'll come looking for the species they threw away. She looked back at the stars. And we'll be ready. 50 years had passed since the rejection. 50 years of pain. 50 years of death. 50 years of struggle that would have broken any other species in the galaxy. Captain Lee stood on the bridge of his mining ship, the Defiance, and watched the asteroid field spin slowly before him. The rocks here were full of rare minerals that council species would pay fortunes for. The problem was simple. The radiation in this sector was so strong that it could kill an unprotected person in minutes. Council ships could not even get close without their systems failing. But the Defiance was not a council ship. Shields holding at 92%, reported his engineer, a young woman named. She was small, with short black hair and oil stains on her face. She was also the person had ever met. We can stay in the field for another 6 hours before we need to pull back. Nodded. Tell the mining teams to work fast. I want every gram of titanium we can carry. This was life in the outer rim. Every day was a fight against the universe itself. The stars here were old and angry. They threw out radiation that would fry normal electronics. The planets were either frozen solid or burning hot. The asteroid fields were so dense that navigation was almost impossible. In the first 10 years, humanity had lost 3 colony ships. 40,000 people, gone in an instant. Entire families wiped out because a star decided to flare, or because an asteroid appeared out of nowhere, or because the cold was just too much for the heating systems to handle. The council heard about these losses. They nodded their heads and said it was expected. They said humanity would give up soon. They said the outer rim would swallow these foolish young creatures, and the galaxy would forget they ever existed. They were wrong. On the frozen world of 7, Governor Minu stood at the entrance of his city and smiled. Behind him, 2 million people lived and worked in underground chambers that stretched for kilometers. Geothermal plants pulled heat from the planet's core. Hydroponic farms grew food in conditions that council scientists said were impossible. Children played in parks lit by artificial sunlight. Couples walked along streets that had been carved from solid ice. Another group of colonists arrived this morning, his assistant told him. 3,000 from Earth. They're asking where to sign up for work. Minu laughed. Tell them there's plenty of work. There's always plenty of work. This was the human way. When the universe pushed, humans pushed back harder. When the universe said something was impossible, humans found a way to make it possible. The outer rim was supposed to be their grave. Instead, it became their forge. Back on the Defiance, was working on something that would change everything. She had been studying the strange gravitational patterns unique to the outer rim, the way space twisted and bent near the unstable stars, the way objects moved in ways that council physics said they should not move. I think I've figured it out, she told one night. They were sitting in the ship's small cafeteria, drinking terrible coffee and eating protein bars. The gravitational anomalies, we can use them. Raised an eyebrow, use them how? Pulled out a tablet and showed him her calculations. The council's ships use standard hyperspace drives. They punch a hole through space and travel from one point to another. It works, but it's slow and it uses a lot of energy. I know how hyperspace works, said. Yes, but look at this, pointed to a diagram. The anomalies in the outer rim create natural pathways, like rivers in space. If we can modify our engines to ride these pathways instead of fighting against them, we could travel twice as fast while using half the energy. Stared at the diagram. He was not a scientist, but he understood enough to know that what was suggesting was either brilliant or insane. Has anyone ever tried this? He asked. Grinned. No one has ever been stupid enough to try. That's why it's perfect for us. 6 months later, the Defiance became the first ship to use what called the slingshot drive. It was terrifying. The ship shook so hard that thought it would fall apart. The lights flickered. The hull groaned. Several crew members vomited. But when they came out the other side, they had traveled in 2 hours what would have taken a council ship 8 hours, and their fuel tanks were still half full. Word spread quickly. Within a year, every human ship in the outer rim was being retrofitted with slingshot drives. Within 5 years, human ships were the fastest in the galaxy. The council noticed. They pretended not to care, but they noticed. The humans were not just surviving, they were thriving. On 7, Minu received a message from Earth. Ambassador Park had died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 93. Before she died, she had recorded a message for all the colonies in the outer rim. Minu played the message in the city's central plaza. Everyone stopped to listen. My fellow humans, his voice said. She sounded old and tired, but there was still fire in her words. 50 years ago, I stood before the Galactic Council and accepted their sentence. They gave us the dead places, the forgotten corners of creation. They expected us to wither and die. The crowd was silent. Instead, we have built something beautiful. We have turned wastelands into gardens. We have turned darkness into light. We have proven that humanity cannot be destroyed by distance or difficulty or despair. Minu felt tears forming in his eyes. I will not live to see what we become, continued, but I know it will be magnificent. The council rejected us because they feared our potential. One day they will see that potential realized, and on that day I hope we will show them not vengeance but grace, not hatred but strength. That is the human way. The message ended. For a long moment no one spoke. Then slowly someone began to clap. Others joined in. Soon the entire plaza was filled with applause and cheering and tears. The humans called themselves Rim Dwellers now. They said it with pride. They wore patches on their uniforms showing the outer rim's spiral shape. They told stories about the early days, about the ships that were lost, about the heroes who sacrificed everything so others could live. The council called them exiles. The council said they were nothing. The council believed they were contained, controlled, forgotten. But in the darkness between stars, something was being built. Something that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. Something that started with a rejected ambassador's promise and grew with every ship that flew, every city that rose, every child that was born under alien suns. 50 years after the rejection, humanity was not dead. Humanity was just getting started. And the galaxy was not ready for what came next. 100 years after the rejection, the galaxy learned to fear again. The swarm came from the galactic core. They were ancient creatures, older than the council itself. History books said they had been destroyed 50,000 years ago in a war that killed billions. The history books were wrong. They looked like insects, but they were the size of ships. Their bodies were covered in black shells that could survive the vacuum of space. They had no minds that anyone could understand. They had no goals except one. They ate. They consumed. They destroyed everything in their path and moved on to the next meal. 3 council worlds fell in the first month. Fleet Admiral Shin Ara received the news on her flagship, the Iron Will. She was 60 years old, with white hair cut short and a face that showed no fear. She had been born on Seven, raised in the underground cities that her people had carved from ice and stone. She had never seen Earth. She had never wanted to. The Outer Rim was her home, and the Outer Rim had made her strong. "Show me the reports," she ordered. Her tactical officer, a young man named Han, pulled up the holographic display. Red dots spread across the map like a disease. Each dot was a swarm fleet. Each fleet contained thousands of the creatures. "They're moving fast," said. "At this rate, they'll reach the inner council territories within 6 months. After that." He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Ara studied the map in silence. Around her, the bridge crew waited. They were the best humanity had to offer. Men and women who had grown up fighting for every breath, every meal, every moment of survival. They were not afraid of the swarm. They were not afraid of anything. "Has the council contacted us?" Ara asked. "Not yet," replied, "but they will." He was right. The message came 3 days later, delivered by a diplomat named. His scales were pale green, which meant he was nervous. He had reason to be. The ship that carried him was an old council cruiser, slow and clumsy compared to the human vessels that surrounded it. Was brought to Ara's ready room. He looked around at the human technology, at the displays and controls that were decades ahead of anything the council possessed. His scales turned even paler. "Fleet Admiral," he said, trying to sound official, "the Galactic Council requests your assistance in the war against the swarm." Ara did not stand up. She did not offer him a seat. She simply looked at him with eyes that had seen 100 battles. "Request," she said. Interesting word choice. Shifted uncomfortably. "The swarm is a threat to all species, including humanity. Surely you understand that helping us is in your own interest." "I understand many things," Ara replied. "I understand that 100 years ago, the Council rejected humanity. I understand that they gave us the dead zones and expected us to die. I understand that while we were struggling to survive, the Council did nothing to help us." "That was a different time," said weakly. "Was it?" Ara leaned forward. "Tell me, diplomat, how many council ships came to help when the colony ship Horizon crashed and killed 10,000 of our people? How many council doctors came when the plague swept through Seven? How many council hands reached out when we were drowning in the darkness?" Said nothing. None, Ara answered her own question. Not one. You left us to die, and now you come asking for help because you cannot save yourselves. The diplomat's scales flushed red with shame. The council made mistakes. We acknowledge that, but the swarm will not stop with council space. Eventually, they will reach the outer rim. Eventually, they will come for you too. Ara stood up slowly. She walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the swarm was eating its way through civilizations that had existed for thousands of years. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were dying. She thought about Ambassador Park. She thought about the message the old woman had left behind. I hope we will show them not vengeance but grace. We'll help, Ara said finally. Nearly collapsed with relief. Thank you, Fleet Admiral, the Council will be. I'm not finished. Ara turned to face him. We'll help not because you deserve it, not because we owe you anything. We'll help because that's who we are, because humanity does not abandon those in need, even those who abandoned us. She pressed a button on her desk. All ships, battle stations, we move in 1 hour. The human fleet was a sight the galaxy had never seen. 3,000 warships, each one equipped with slingshot drives and weapons that Council engineers could not understand. They moved like dancers, spinning through space with a grace that seemed impossible for machines of their size. The Battle of Meridian would be remembered for 10,000 years. The swarm met them above a dying Council world. Millions of the creatures, their black shells blocking out the stars. They had never lost a battle. They had never faced an enemy that did not run or fall. They had never faced humanity. The human ships hit the swarm like a hammer hitting glass. Slingshot drives allowed them to appear in unexpected places, strike hard, and vanish before the creatures could respond. Weapons designed in the harsh conditions of the outer rim tore through shells that had resisted every Council weapon. But the battle was not won by ships alone. Sergeant Major Han led the assault on the Swarm Queen's vessel. His team was 12 soldiers, all volunteers, all knowing they might not come back. They wore armor designed to survive the most hostile environments in the galaxy. They carried weapons they had built themselves. The inside of the Queen's ship was a nightmare. Living walls, air that burned the lungs, darkness that seemed to move and breathe. His team pushed forward anyway. They found the Queen in the ship's core. She was massive, larger than a building, surrounded by thousands of her children. She looked at with eyes that held no intelligence, no mercy, no understanding. For humanity, said. The explosion was visible from orbit. When the Queen died, the swarm broke. Without her mind guiding them, the creatures became confused and slow. The human fleet destroyed them by the thousands. The Battle of Meridian was over. Humanity had won. On the Council, the leaders gathered to watch the reports. They saw human ships flying in formations they could not understand. They saw human soldiers doing things they thought impossible. They saw a species they had rejected becoming the saviors of everything they held dear. The High Speaker, the same being who had rejected humanity a century ago, watched in silence. Its light flickered with emotions that no human could read. What have we done? It whispered. What have we created? Nobody answered, nobody knew. But everyone understood that the galaxy would never be the same again. 150 years after the rejection, the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The old Galactic Council was gone. In its place stood the Galactic Assembly, a new governing body where every species had a voice. Humanity held a permanent seat at the highest level, not because they demanded it, because everyone else insisted. The outer rim was no longer a wasteland. It was the beating heart of galactic civilization. Worlds that the Council had called worthless now produced technology that made ancient races weep with envy. Human ships were the fastest. Human medicine was the most advanced. Human engineers solved problems that had puzzled other species for. President stood before the assembly and looked at the representatives of 100 species. She was the great-granddaughter of Ambassador Park. She had the same fire in her eyes, the same strength in her voice. 150 years ago you gave us the dead places, she said. The chamber was silent. Every eye, every sensor, every consciousness was focused on her. The forgotten corners of creation. You expected us to wither and die. She paused, letting the words sink in. Instead, we learned to thrive where no one else could. We became stronger because we had no choice. We invented new technologies because survival demanded it. We united as one people because division meant extinction. The representatives shifted uncomfortably. Some of them remembered the old days. Some of them had been among those who voted to reject humanity. They did not look proud now. You feared what we might become with resources and opportunity, continued. You should have feared what we would become without them. The assembly erupted in applause. Humans clapped loudest, but they were not alone. Many species had come to respect humanity. Many had come to depend on human technology, human protection, human leadership. But not everyone was happy. Intelligence Director O was not at the assembly. She was in a dark room, reading reports that made her blood run cold. Was 52 years old, with sharp features and sharper instincts. She had spent her life protecting humanity from threats they never knew existed. She had stopped assassinations, prevented wars, and uncovered plots that would have destroyed everything her people had built. This was the worst one yet. "Are you certain about this?" she asked her agent, a young man who had spent 5 years undercover among the council species. He nodded. His face was pale. "I've confirmed it through 3 separate sources. 7 of the original 12 council species are involved. They've been planning this for decades." Looked at the data on her screen. It was a bioweapon designed specifically to attack human DNA. One release into a major population center would start a plague that could not be stopped. Within 50 years, humanity would be extinct. They called it the silencing. "When do they plan to use it?" asked. "Soon, maybe within months. They're afraid of how powerful we've become. They think this is the only way to stop us." Closed her eyes. 150 years of struggle. 150 years of building, growing, becoming more than anyone thought possible. And 7 frightened species wanted to erase it all because they could not stand being second best. She opened her eyes. "Get me president now." The meeting took place in a secure room deep beneath the Capitol. Sat at one end of the table. Sat at the other. Between them was General No, commander of all human military forces, and Dr. I.M., the greatest scientist of her generation. "We have 3 options," said. "First, we strike first. Destroy the conspirators before they can release the weapon." Nodded slowly. "My forces are ready. We could end this in a week." "And become exactly what they fear," said quietly. "The aggressive, dangerous species they always claimed we were. No, what's the second option?" Hesitated. "We run. Evacuate human populations to the furthest edges of the outer rim. Hide until they give up looking for us." Hyde's voice was hard. "After everything we've achieved, never." "Then we're left with the third option," said. She was small and quiet, but when she spoke, everyone listened. "We cure it." The others turned to look at her. "The silencing is a bioweapon," explained. "It targets specific genetic markers unique to humans, but I've been studying the design. It's based on technology that's centuries old, technology we've already surpassed." She pulled up a diagram on the display. "I can create a countermeasure, not just for humans but for every species in the galaxy, a universal cure that makes the silencing useless, and then we release it to everyone, including the conspirators." Frowned. "You want to give our enemies the cure to their own weapon." "I want to take away their power," replied. "If everyone has the cure, the weapon is worthless. and everyone will know that humanity could have let them suffer but chose to save them instead. Was quiet for a long moment. She thought about her great-grandmother's words, not vengeance but grace, not hatred but strength. Do it, she said finally, but I want the truth released at the same time. Everyone needs to know what the conspirators tried to do. Let their own people judge them. The next 3 months were the most intense in human history. Worked without sleep, leading a team of thousands as they developed the universal cure. Agents gathered evidence, tracing every connection, every secret meeting, every credit transfer. When the moment came, humanity moved with perfect coordination. The cure was released simultaneously on every major world in the galaxy. It spread through air and water, harmless to living beings but deadly to the silencing. Within a week, the bioweapon was useless everywhere. At the same moment, evidence of the conspiracy was broadcast to every news network in known space. Communications between the conspirators, financial records, scientific data, everything humanity had gathered was laid bare for all to see. The reaction was immediate and violent. On Prime, crowds surrounded the government buildings, demanding justice for the leaders who had tried to commit genocide. On the military arrested its own generals. On 6 other worlds, governments fell overnight as populations learned what had been done in their name. The conspirators tried to run. Most did not get far. President addressed the galaxy once more. We had the right to strike back, she said. We had the power to destroy those who tried to destroy us. Instead, we chose to save them, not because we are weak, because we are strong enough to show mercy. She looked directly into the cameras. Let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks humanity can be erased. We do not forget. We do not forgive easily, but we also do not become the monsters our enemies want us to be. That is not who we are. The High Speaker requested a private meeting with. They met on neutral ground, just the two of them, in a garden filled with flowers from 100 worlds. Your ancestor stood before me 150 years ago, the being of light said. I rejected her. I rejected all of humanity. I thought I was protecting the galaxy. Waited. I was wrong. The admission seemed to cost the ancient being something. We were all wrong about your species, about what you could become, about everything. Yes, said simply, you were. What happens now? Looked at the flowers. Each one had been brought from a different world, yet they grew together in harmony, different but united. Now we move forward, she said. Together, all of us. That's the only way the galaxy survives what's coming next. The High Speaker flickered. What's coming next? Smiled, and for a moment, she looked exactly like her great-grandmother. The future, she said, and humanity will be there to help build it. 200 years after the rejection, the galaxy was at peace. The conspirators had been judged by their own people. Some were imprisoned. Some were exiled. A few took their own lives rather than face the shame of what they had tried to do. The species that had once tried to destroy humanity now looked to humans as examples of what civilization could become. But humanity was not satisfied with peace alone. In a shipyard orbiting the human of New Sol, a vessel unlike any other was being built. It was called the New Dawn, and it was designed for one purpose: to explore the unknown regions beyond the outer rim, the places where no species had ever gone, the true edge of the galaxy. Lieutenant Park watched the final pieces of the ship come together. He was 28 years old, with dark hair and eyes that always seemed to be looking at something far away. He was the direct descendant of Ambassador Park, and like all her descendants, he carried her fire in his blood. She's beautiful, said a voice beside him. He turned to see Ensign Song, his navigator. She was young, barely 22, but she had graduated at the top of her class in astral navigation. She had memorized star charts that stretched for thousands of light years. She dreamed of seeing places that existed only in theory. "She's more than beautiful," said. "She's a promise." "A promise of what?" Smiled. "That will never stop reaching, never stop exploring, never stop becoming more than we are." The launch ceremony drew billions of viewers across the galaxy. President, now 87 years old but still sharp as ever, gave the final address. 200 years ago, my great-grandmother stood before the Galactic Council and accepted humanity's exile, she said. Her voice was carried to every corner of known space. They gave us nothing and expected us to disappear. Instead, we built an empire from dust. We saved those who abandoned us. We became something even we did not expect. She paused, looking at the new dawn gleaming in the starlight. But this is not the end of our story. It is not even the middle. The galaxy we know is only a small part of what exists. Out there, beyond the stars we have mapped, there are mysteries waiting to be solved, worlds waiting to be discovered, friends waiting to be made. She turned to Face and his crew, standing in formation beside their ship. "Go," she said simply. "Go and show the universe what humanity can do." The new dawn launched at midnight, its slingshot drive carrying it faster than any ship had ever traveled before. On the bridge, watched the familiar stars fade behind them. "First jump in 30 seconds, reported. "Coordinates locked for the void expanse." The void expanse was a region of space that had terrified explorers for no stars, no planets, no light of any kind, just an endless darkness that stretched for thousands of light years. Council species had sent probes into the void. None had ever returned. "Are you scared?" asked. Shook her head. "My grandmother was born on 7 during the plague years. She told me stories about how people would die in the night and freeze solid before morning. But they kept going. They kept fighting. They didn't give up." She looked at with determination. "If they could survive that, I can handle some darkness." The jump was smooth. One moment they were in known space. The next they were surrounded by absolute nothing. "Sensors active," reported the science officer, a woman named. "I'm picking up. Wait, this can't be right." "What is it?" asked. His face was pale. "There's something out here, something massive, and it's coming toward us." The flickered. For a moment nothing happened. Then slowly a shape began to form in the darkness. It was larger than anything had ever seen, larger than stations, larger than planets. It was a structure of some kind, but built on a scale that made no sense. "What is that?" whispered. A light appeared on the structure, then another, then thousands of them arranged in patterns that seemed almost like words. "They're trying to communicate," said. "The patterns, they're mathematical prime numbers, geometric progressions. They're showing us they're intelligent." His heart was pounding. This was first contact with something beyond the known galaxy, something that had been waiting in the darkness, perhaps for millions of years. "Open all channels," he ordered. "Broadcast our first contact protocols. Let them know we come in peace." The response came immediately. The lights on the massive structure rearranged themselves into a new pattern. Then, impossibly, a voice filled the bridge. It was not speaking any human language, but somehow understood it perfectly. "We have waited long for you," the voice said. "The young ones, the ones who would not give up, the ones who turned death into life and darkness into light." "Who are you?" asked. "We are the builders. We created the pathways through space that your people learned to use. We seeded the galaxy with life billions of years ago. We have been watching, waiting, hoping that one species would prove itself worthy." The bridge crew exchanged shocked looks. "Worthy of what?" asked. "Of inheriting what we leave behind. Our knowledge, our technology, our place in the cosmos. We are old, young one, older than your stars, and we are ready to pass on our legacy to those who have earned it." The lights shifted again, forming images. Saw galaxies being born. He saw civilizations rising and falling. He saw the history of the universe itself, compressed into moments of pure understanding. Why us, he asked. Why humanity? Because you were tested and did not break. You were rejected and did not surrender. You were given nothing and created everything. You showed mercy when you had the power for revenge. You chose hope when despair would have been easier. The voice seemed to smile, though how a voice could smile could not say. You are what we hoped all our children would become, strong enough to survive, wise enough to grow, kind enough to share. Grabbed's arm. Do you understand what this means? Everything we've accomplished, everything we've built, it was just the beginning. Understood. The galaxy they knew was just the first chapter. Beyond it lay an entire universe of possibilities, and humanity would be there to explore them all. We accept your gift, he said to the builders, and we promise to use it well. We know you will, the voice replied. That is why we chose you. The New Dawn spent 6 months with the builders, learning secrets that would transform human civilization once again. When they finally returned to known space, they brought knowledge that would have taken other species millions of years to discover on their own. Stood before the Galactic Assembly and told them what he had found. Humans and aliens alike listened in wonder as he described the builders and their gift. This knowledge is not just for humanity, he said. It belongs to everyone, every species in the galaxy. Together, we will use it to build something greater than any of us could build alone. The Assembly voted unanimously to create a new organization dedicated to exploring and sharing the Builders' legacy. They called it the United Galactic Exploration Initiative. It was led by humans, but it included representatives from every known species. The High Speaker approached after the vote. The ancient being's light was brighter than had ever seen it. Your ancestor was rejected by beings who thought they knew everything, the High Speaker said. Now her descendant has given us proof that we knew nothing at all. The universe is larger and more wonderful than we ever imagined, and it was humanity who showed us. Thought of his great-great-great-grandmother. He thought of the fire she had carried in her eyes when she accepted exile. He thought of all the generations who had fought and built and dreamed so that this moment could happen. We didn't do it alone, he said. We had help from those who came before us, from those who believed in us, from those who taught us that strength and kindness are not opposites. He looked out at the assembly. Hundreds of species, once separated by fear and mistrust, now united by shared wonder. This is what humanity can do, he said. Not conquer, not control, but connect, bring together, build bridges where there were walls. The New Dawn launched again 1 year later, heading deeper into the unknown. Behind it flew ships from 100 different species, all working together under human leadership. Sat beside on the bridge, watching the stars blur as they jumped to hyperspace. Where do you think we'll end up? She asked. Smiled. It was the same smile his ancestor had worn 200 years ago, when she had looked at the stars and promised that humanity would be ready. Wherever it is, he said, we'll face it together, that's the human way. The fleet disappeared into the light, carrying the hopes of every species in the galaxy toward a future no one could predict but everyone believed in. And somewhere in a garden on a quiet world, a monument stood in honor of Ambassador Park. The inscription on its base was simple. They gave us nothing, we built everything, and when they needed us, we answered not with vengeance but with grace. That is the human way. The stars shone down on the words, and the universe stretched out in all directions, full of mysteries waiting to be solved. Humanity was ready.